So how are agencies organized? Well, believe it or not, as you go through the process, you'll probably see a lot of terms that are familiar. I mean, again, if you think about the corporate structure and the structure of an agency, you're probably going to see a lot of common names. All right? Why? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. All right? A chairperson presides at meetings and appointed by the president. Okay? A secretary takes agency minutes, legal custodian of records, answers telephone calls, yada, yada, yada. I'm teasing, by the way. General counsel, usually ratified by the Senate, chief legal officer. All right? Executive director, supervises administrative functions, supervises research and planning. Again, if you look at this, you probably see some common names that might be in a corporation. You also have a director of operations, administrative law judges. Remember that quasi-judicial stuff I was telling you about? There it is. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story about an administrative law judge. The first time I went before an administrative law judge, it was for the Department of Driver Services. The judge was a female. Obviously, what you always want to do when you're addressing a judge is to say, Your Honor. So I went into the courtroom. I said, Your Honor, may I approach? Judge says, of course, Mr. Childs, you may approach. I went up. I said, Your Honor, I'm looking for the consent plea for my client, Mr. Such and Such. Judge says, of course, Mr. Childs, here it is. And I said, thank you, dear. Yeah, that went over really well. Remember, administrative law judges are judges. You say, Your Honor. I said, thank you, dear. She gave me a look I will never forget. But to this day, she does know who I am now. Funny story. Influencing agency decisions. Public hearings. The public may present evidence supporting or opposing proposed agency actions. And this is a good thing. Why? Because the public certainly needs to have a voice. Government control. The president appoints chairs and generally may remove chairs. Congress may abolish an agency, alter the agency's budget, or redefine agency authority and jurisdiction. Why? So remember, Manny Faces is up here, Buzz Off is down here. This is the legislative branch, this is the agency. Standing to sue. Reviewability. Agency decisions are reviewable except if the statute precludes review or the agency's action is committed to the agency's discretion by law. All right. So again, if you're going to have standing to sue, you got to have a reason to sue. But if a statute created by the legislative branch is out there that says, hey, you can't go against what the administrative agency is saying, then you can't do it. The aggrieved party must be harmed by agency action to have standing. And again, folks, this is basic constitutional law here. Certainly, if you haven't been harmed as a result of an action, you won't have standing to sue. So to put it easier, if my friend Bob gets hit in the head, for battery, has a cause of action against the guy that hit him, can I sue on Bob's behalf? No. Why? Because I don't have standing. I wasn't the one that was harmed. Now, the harm that you're talking about must be economic or non-economic, meaning that you've got to actually have something happen. All right? Review. Rules and regulations must be within the legislative grant of power, meaning Manny Faces is going to give Buzz Off certain powers. As long as the actions undertaken by Buzz Off are within the confines of what was granted by Manny Faces, it's fine. All right? Now, is the delegation valid? Is it definite? Did they violate due process? Remember, the government can't take away due process or has to give you due process if they want to take away life, liberty, or property. Now, agency power is limited to certain areas. In Buzz Off's case, the example I've been using, he's limited to the FAA. All right? Can Buzz Off limit honey production? It's a trick question. Okay? No, he can't in this example, but I would make the argument, given the fact that he's a bumblebee, that there may be some arguments here. But no, he can't. Why? Because he's the FAA. So when you're looking at it, the way this is going, usually they're given broad language. Why? Because the legislative branch wants to delegate its authority to the administrative agency. Now, if the authorities exceed, they're acting outside the scope of their authority. Now, judicial review is limited. Agency authority is limited. It's delegated from the legislator, and they develop rules of procedure. Because once they're developed, they need to develop how they're going to proceed as an administrative agency. Courts lack authority to substitute for agencies. Now, what about doctrines? Exhaustion of remedies. Court created a rule that limits when courts can review administrative decisions. Meaning, and this is interesting, if you have a problem with the administrative agency, you have to go through all of their steps to have your dispute resolved before you can take it over to the courts. Right? Primary jurisdiction applies when a claim is originally filed with the courts. Now, you may originally file something in the courts against them, but could always get sent back to the administrative agency to go through their processes. Review of factual determinations. Now, court does presume findings of fact are correct, and they also analyze agency proceedings. But the court does not reweigh evidence, make independent determinations, and substates its view for the agencies. So again, what you're seeing is a lot of power with these agencies. Now, what is the cost to business persons? Regulation is a form of taxation. Alright? If you're being regulated, now if you have to pay taxes for a license, taxes to do business, then you're being regulated. Regulations forces bureaucracy in business. Now, lobbying, okay? Regulation can stifle competition and innovation. Sure. I mean, is there any reason for the electric company to be more efficient? I mean, if they're going to be regulated at the same price regardless, should they do any better? The mandated paperwork creates an enormous cost. Remember, you've got to go through all the steps with the administrative agencies to get things done. Cost to society. Cost-benefit analysis is often not helpful. Right? Regulation can cause inefficiency if it becomes too cumbersome. Is it worth it to try to be more efficient? Is the cost of going through the agency going to be greater than the profit you receive as a result? So it can stifle things. Balancing the cost of keeping up and the cost of non-compliance is an issue for many businesses. And what's the cost of not being in compliance versus the cost of trying to become in compliance? Which one's more? Well, the business is going to do whatever's cheaper. So you can see there's good and bad when it comes to administrative agencies. It's good and bad when it comes to regulation. It's just about finding that happy medium. But you need to know that that information is out there.